I'm Hibashraf. Welcome to Diksha classroom. In this video, we are going to discuss the third topic of the module, memory and forgetting. Models of memory. There are many theoretical perspectives in memory. In this video, we will be focusing the major theory, levels of processing model by Craig and Lockhart. Let's start. So in this video, we'll be discussing the other two major theoretical perspectives in memory module, levels of processing model and Telving's model of memory. This video will be done in two parts. In part 1, we'll be discussing the first theoretical model, levels of processing model of memory. So levels of processing model of memory. This is a memory model which is proposed by Craig and Lockhart in 1972. It focuses on the depth of processing involved in memory and predicts the deeper information is processed, the longer memory trace will last. The key theme of this model is that if the information is deeper, then the memory will be longer. If deeper the information is processed, the longer a memory trace will last. There are so many differences between the other models of memory and this model proposed by Craig and Lockhart. It is a non-structured approach to memory. The basic idea is that memory is really just what happens as a result of processing information. If we process a particular information in deep, we can memorize it better. If we are not processing a particular information as so deep, we cannot remember that information as well. So this theory is all about how well we process information and then how well we remember that particular information. So for them, memory is just a byproduct of the depth of processing of information, and there is no clear distinction between short-term memory and long-term memory. This is the main difference between the other theoretical model and the levels of processing model. Craig and Lockhart didn't mention any type of stores in memory system, not short-term memory, not long-term memory, not any of the memory stores. That is why it is known as a non-structured approach to memory. So let's see what are the levels of processing as proposed by Craig and Lockhart. According to Craig and Lockhart, we can process a particular information in three different ways: shallow processing, intermediate processing, and deep processing. According to them, how well we remember a particular information is depend on what type of processing we have done: shallow processing, intermediate processing, or deep processing. The first type of processing is shallow processing. It is the basic type of processing. It's a very peripheral type of processing. It's a very basic type of processing. It is known as a surface level processing of information. It takes in two forms. Structural processing and phonemic processing. I know you're confused with the intermediate processing. Phonemic is a type of intermediate processing, but it is actually included in the shallow processing when they proposed the first version of theory. So, shallow processing is of two types: structural processing and phonemic processing. We can surfacially process information or peripherally process information in two different forms. The first way is to structural processing. We can process information by noting the appearance of the stimuli or appearance of the input, which is when we encode only the physical qualities of something. Let's discuss it with an example. If you are processing a word cat, it is a particular information. If you are processing this information by using shallow processing, you will note down the appearance, basic physical structure of these letters. Okay, it is C. This is a curve and A is written like this and this is T. Okay, so CAT is equal to cat. This type of processing is known as shallow processing. You are not concerned with the meaning of this letter or meaning of this word. You are not concerned with any of the other things related to this letter or this word. You are just considering the letter or the physical qualities, total appearance of this particular information, and then processing it. What you are doing is shallow processing. It is known as the structural processing because you are only considering the structure, the basic structure or the basic appearance here. This type of processing is structural processing, which is shallow in nature. Or you can use intermediate processing. In intermediate processing, you can use phonemic processing. Phonemic processing is when we encoded sound. In this particular example, if you are processing this CAT word by using phonemic processing, you will be processing this information like C. C means, okay, C-A-T, C-A-T, cat, C-A-T, cat. The type of information you are processing here is intermediate processing or phonemic processing. You are not concerned with the structure, but you are concerned with the sound. How this word sound is the main thing here. That is why you are doing phonemic processing to process this particular information. If you are processing an information based on its sound or phonemic processing, you are using intermediate processing. Now you may have confusion. Shallow processing, we have said that shallow processing is two types, structural processing and phonemic processing. And I have said intermediate processing is phonemic processing. Yes, you are right. But in the first version of the theory, shallow processing were of two types, structural processing and phonemic processing. And in the later version, they have added that phonemic processing can be defined as a type of intermediate processing. That is why it is just a confusing thing, but don't get confused. Phonemic processing is also a type of shallow processing, but it can be considered as more than a shallow processing. That is why they included the term intermediate processing. So I hope you have understood about the shallow processing and intermediate processing. If you are processing a particular information just by its appearance, you are using structural processing. So you are using shallow processing. If you are using sound while processing a particular information, you are using its phonemic nature. You are doing intermediate processing. The thing you have to consider while studying about levels of processing is that if you are doing shallow processing, it only involves maintenance rehearsal. We know what maintenance rehearsal is. Repetition by words. That is what maintenance rehearsal is. Repetition to help us hold something in the STM and leads to fairly short-term retention of the information. This is the only type of rehearsal to take place within the multi-store model. That means if you are using a particular information to process as a shallow processing approach, what you can do is maintenance rehearsal. That means if an information is used to shallow processing, the only thing you can do is maintenance rehearsal, and the only thing you can have to store in the memory store is short-term memory. Simply saying, an information which has shallowly processed or had a shallow processing will not go to the long-term memory store. It will exist in the short-term memory store only, not to the LTM store. For the information to pass to the LTM store, you have to do deep processing. Deep processing involves semantic processing. We know what semantic is. Semantic processing means meaning-wise processing. It happens when we encode the meaning of a word and relate it to similar words with similar meaning. We know in the example cat, to process this information by semantic processing, you will be process this information like, okay, CAT means cat. Okay, cat is an animal. Okay, it has 4 legs and it has 2 eyes. Okay, this is the structure of the cat. Okay, cat will do that thing, cat will do this thing. What you're doing here is semantic processing. You're not just considering the appearance, not only the appearance, not only how it pronounce or how it sound, but also what is the thing and how is it doing. You are processing the meaning of that particular information, then you are doing semantic processing. If you are using semantic processing, that means you are processing that information in the deeper level, or you are doing deep processing. Deep processing involves elaboration rehearsal. In shallow processing, the type of rehearsal involved was maintenance rehearsal, just by repetition, verbal repetition of words. But in deep processing, we are using elaboration rehearsal, which involves a more meaningful analysis. For example, images, thinking, associations, etc. It will lead to a better recall of things. For example, giving a words a meaning or linking them with previous knowledge, all of this will help to keep the information in the long-term memory. So putting it together, if you are using shallow processing, you are doing maintenance rehearsal. Maintenance rehearsal is the repetition of words. It will help to keep the information in the short-term memory store, but it will not pass the information to the long-term memory store. But if you are using deep processing, semantic processing, you will be using the elaboration rehearsal. If you are using elaboration rehearsal, the information from the STM memory will pass to the long-term memory, and in the long-term memory that information will be permanent. I hope you understood the concept. Now just sum up the levels of processing model. So, levels of processing model was proposed by Craig and Lockhart. They didn't mention anything about different memory stores like STM or LTM, but in fact they mentioned the importance of the levels of processing of information and how well we remember that information. According to them, we can process information in 3 different levels: shallow processing, intermediate processing, and deep processing. If we are using shallow processing, what we are doing is structural processing. We are considering the appearance, how a particular information or a particular thing looks like. Then you can see here, if you are processing a particular information using shallow processing, the memory trace will be very weak. Now, if you are using intermediate processing, we will be processing by using its sound or acoustic processing. Then we can see the difference. The memory trace here is much stronger in intermediate processing. And the third processing is deep processing. Deep processing will be using meaning or semantic processing. If we are semantically processing a particular information, the memory trace will be much stronger and it will lead to long-term retention, or it will lead to long-term memory store. From these figures, you can identify the strength of the memory trace that have formed during the information process. This means if the information is processed deeply, then only it will lead to long-term memory retention. So the best level of processing is deep processing. So these are the main concepts proposed by Craig and Lockhart in their theory, the levels of processing model. I hope you understood the concept. The next theoretical perspective of memory will be discussed in the second part of this video. Thank you.